How do you survive 115-degree heat when finding shade can become another problem instead of protection? This is not simply about weather. It is about what happens when extreme heat collides with homelessness, leaving people to navigate impossible choices every single day. Welcome to Homeless in America. Phoenix is famous for endless blue skies, towering desert landscapes, and sunshine that attracts millions of visitors every year. It is one of America's fastest-growing cities, celebrated for opportunity and rapid growth. But beneath that image lies another Phoenix, a city where summer temperatures can rise beyond 115 degrees, a city where thousands of people face those temperatures without air conditioning, without permanent shelter, and sometimes without even a safe place to rest. Today's documentary is not simply about homelessness. It is about how climate, housing affordability, and public space intersect to create impossible choices for people already living on the edge. If these stories move you, subscribe now. Together, we can replace judgment with understanding and statistics with human faces. Part 1. Context and Crisis. Phoenix has always been a city defined by extremes. Towering cacti stand beneath cloudless skies. New neighborhoods continue stretching farther into the desert every year. Construction cranes reshape the skyline, while thousands of new residents arrive searching for opportunity. Yet for many people already struggling, those same changes have made life increasingly fragile. Housing costs have climbed dramatically over recent years, outpacing many household incomes. Families who once managed to pay rent have found themselves choosing between groceries, medical bills, transportation, and keeping a roof over their heads. This is not simply a housing story. This is a story about what happens when rising costs collide with one of the harshest climates in America. Every summer, Maricopa County records hundreds of heat-associated deaths. While every case is different, people living outdoors face some of the greatest risks because they remain exposed hour after hour beneath relentless desert sun. Numbers like these can feel distant, so let's translate them into everyday life. Imagine waking before sunrise, because the coolest hours of the day are also your only chance to safely move across the city. Imagine carefully rationing every bottle of water, because replacing it may require walking several miles in dangerous temperatures. Imagine watching bus shelters, library doors, or cooling centers not as conveniences, but as lifelines. For thousands of people experiencing homelessness, these are not unusual situations. They are ordinary summer routines. Consider David. For years, he worked in a warehouse outside Phoenix. Over time, shifts helped him cover rent and support himself comfortably. He never imagined sleeping outdoors. Then, medical bills followed an unexpected illness. Rent increased again. Savings disappeared. Eventually, eviction became unavoidable. Today, his mornings begin with a simple calculation. How long can he remain in one place before the heat forces him to move again? His backpack contains nearly everything he owns: water, extra socks, a phone charger, important documents carefully protected inside plastic bags. What once represented weekend travel now represents survival, because when every possession must fit on your shoulders, every decision carries weight. No shelter, no cool bedroom, only another day measured by the movement of the sun. And yet, David's story is far from unique. Across Phoenix, countless people are navigating similar realities, not because they stopped caring about their future, but because circumstances changed faster than they could recover. The question is no longer simply how someone becomes homeless. The deeper question is how homelessness changes when every summer becomes more dangerous than the last. That is where our story continues. Part 2. The Spiral. To understand homelessness in Phoenix, we must look differently. It is easy to imagine that the greatest danger is losing a home. But for thousands of people living on the streets, losing a home is often only the beginning. What follows is a daily struggle against a force that cannot be negotiated with, argued against, or ignored. The desert, every summer morning, begins with a countdown. By 7 o'clock, the sun is already climbing. By noon, sidewalks shimmer beneath the heat. By late afternoon, metal benches become almost impossible to touch, and dark pavement stores enough energy to radiate heat long after sunset. For someone living indoors, these conditions are exhausting. For someone living outside, they can become life-threatening. This is not simply hot weather. This is prolonged environmental exposure without reliable protection. Many people assume that surviving extreme heat is simply a matter of drinking more water. But water alone cannot replace shade. Water cannot cool overheated concrete. Water cannot provide uninterrupted sleep after another night when temperatures remain dangerously high. And water cannot solve the deeper crisis that brought someone onto the street in the first place. They are not careless. They are navigating a system where each problem creates the next. Housing becomes unaffordable. Without stable housing, maintaining employment becomes more difficult. Without an address, applying for new housing becomes harder. Without consistent transportation, attending appointments becomes uncertain. Without enough rest, every decision becomes more difficult than the day before. The spiral is rarely dramatic. It is usually quiet. One missed paycheck. One unexpected medical expense. One lease renewal that no longer fits the family budget. One eviction notice. Then another week. Another month. Eventually, survival replaces planning. Dreams shrink into today's checklist. Find drinking water. Protect important documents. Charge a phone. Stay alive until sunset. Even public spaces can become difficult to navigate. A shaded bench, a transit stop, or the entrance to a public building may offer temporary relief from dangerous heat. Yet they are not permanent solutions. People experiencing homelessness often find themselves moving repeatedly throughout the day as they try to balance safety, access to services, and local rules governing public spaces. Imagine carrying everything you own while the temperature continues climbing. Imagine calculating each hour based not on work meetings or family dinners, but on where the next patch of shade will be. Imagine knowing that every unnecessary step costs precious energy your body cannot easily replace. That is the hidden burden of homelessness in extreme heat. It is not only physically exhausting, it is mentally exhausting. Every decision becomes urgent, every mistake becomes more costly. Every afternoon becomes another test of endurance. And despite these realities, something remarkable continues to appear across Phoenix. Acts of kindness, volunteers handing out cold water, neighbors checking on familiar faces, street outreach teams returning day after day, often long before anyone notices their work. Because even in the harshest environments, compassion has a way of surviving, and that compassion begins with seeing people not as statistics, but as neighbors. The next faces you meet remind us exactly why that matters. Part 3: Faces and the Day. No one is born with a dream of sleeping on the street. Every person carries a story that began somewhere else. A childhood home, a first apartment, a steady paycheck, a birthday celebration, a family photograph. Before homelessness, there was simply life. Meet Maria. She spent years working in Phoenix's hospitality industry, cleaning hotel rooms and welcoming visitors to the very city that tourists know for sunshine and luxury resorts. She worked hard. She paid rent. She believed difficult seasons would eventually pass. But reduced work hours slowly drained her savings. Temporary motel stays became impossible to afford. Eventually, she and her young daughter were forced to leave the last place they could temporarily call home. Now her mornings begin before sunrise. She carefully folds blankets before anyone else wakes. She checks her daughter's water bottle first, then her own. Next comes a day's route, a public library when it opens, a cooling center during the hottest hours, perhaps a community meal later in the afternoon. Each destination is measured not in miles, but in safety. There is little room for mistakes when temperatures continue climbing. Night brings a different challenge. The air cools only slightly. Concrete continues releasing the heat it absorbed all day. Sleep arrives in short moments. Every unfamiliar sound interrupts rest. Passing vehicle reminds people to remain alert. Tomorrow's survival depends upon recovering enough strength to repeat the same journey again. Many people imagine homelessness as standing still. The reality is constant movement, searching, planning, adjusting, enduring. For many, the backpack becomes more than a practical necessity. It becomes a portable home. Inside may be identification documents, medicine, family photographs, extra clothing, bottled water, phone chargers, and the few personal belongings too meaningful to leave behind. The backpack carries far more than possessions. It carries identity, hope, memory, and the determination to begin again whenever the opportunity finally appears, because they are not defined by what they have lost. They are defined by what they continue carrying despite those losses. This is not simply a story about people surviving another summer. It is a story about human dignity refusing to disappear, even under one of America's most unforgiving suns. Still, dignity alone cannot solve homelessness. For that, doors must begin opening where they have remained closed for far too long. That is where our story turns next. Part 4. Locked Doors and Light Section. A locked doors. For many people, homelessness looks like the final chapter of a story. In reality, it is often the beginning of a maze. Finding housing is difficult without stable income. Finding work is difficult without a permanent address. Receiving important documents is difficult without reliable mail. Replacing identification often requires paperwork, transportation, appointments, and fees resources that become much harder to manage while living outdoors. One obstacle quietly creates another, then another. Soon, what appears to be a single problem has become a chain of barriers that reinforce one another. This is not a personal failure. It is a cage without a door. In Phoenix, extreme summer heat makes that cage even smaller. Hours that could be spent searching for jobs or attending appointments are instead devoted to finding water, locating shade, protecting personal belongings, and avoiding dangerous heat exposure. Survival consumes the time needed to rebuild. When every day becomes an emergency, tomorrow becomes difficult to imagine. Section B. Light. Yet, even in the harshest conditions, light still finds its way through. Across Phoenix, outreach workers begin long before sunrise. Teams from Central Arizona Shelter Services, CAS, connect with people living outdoors, offering emergency shelter, housing navigation, and a path toward greater stability. Nearby, volunteers with St. Vincent de Paul Phoenix distribute cold water, meals, heat relief supplies, and, perhaps most importantly, conversation. That conversation matters because for someone who has spent weeks or months feeling invisible, hearing their own name spoken with kindness can become the first step toward trusting again. Sometimes change begins with something as simple as a bottle of water. Then comes another visit, a health screening, help replacing identification, a housing application, a temporary shelter bed, case management, finally, the possibility of permanent housing. Recovery rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It happens through hundreds of small moments of consistency. One conversation becomes one opportunity. One opportunity becomes one safe night. One safe night becomes the beginning of rebuilding a life. The road home is rarely straight, but every open door makes that journey a little more possible. Part 5. Hope and Outrow. There is hope in Phoenix. Every year, outreach workers, nonprofit organizations, healthcare professionals, volunteers, and community partners help thousands of people move towards safer living situations and long-term housing solutions. Those successes may never become national headlines, but for the person receiving a key to a new apartment, for the parent whose child finally sleeps in an air-conditioned room, for the worker returning to a stable job after months of uncertainty, those moments change everything. Because a city is not measured only by its tallest buildings or fastest growth. It is measured by how it responds when its most vulnerable neighbors need compassion the most. So before judging someone sitting beneath the desert sun, perhaps we should ask a different question. What kind of community do we become when survival itself becomes the greatest daily challenge? If this story helped you see homelessness through a different lens, please subscribe to Homeless in America and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every conversation helps replace misunderstanding with empathy. Benediction. In this moment, we offer a quiet prayer for every person experiencing homelessness in Phoenix. May you find safety in the days ahead. May gentle hands reach out to you with kindness. May the weight you carry begin to lighten. May a warm, stable home soon welcome you back. Thank you for staying until the very end.